Tradition lives because young people come along who catch its romance and add new glories to it. Michael Novak. This is episode 26 of Citadelium, and I'm your host, Yuri Degaya. We are continuing the experiment with the Telegram voice group chat, and I'm happy that some people like it. Not a lot of people join. I think a lot more people will join later. Maybe not, but this is a great experiment nevertheless. And today, I would like to return to the topic of anarcho-capitalism. And I wanted to talk a little bit about anarcho-capitalism on two different levels. The first level would be global, and the second level would be local. So many people believe that an anarchist world is a stateless world. And when I started delving into anarcho-capitalism, I was sure that was the case. There would be no states, no nation states, and everything will be just private. Essentially, the whole planet will be divided up in parcels of land that are owned by private individuals and maybe corporations, and that would be it. No real state, nothing like that. With time, my thinking has developed somewhat. I've read a lot more literature, and I believe right now that it is true to an extent, but not completely. So, if you remember the original communists, they and also left anarchists, and yes, there are anarchists who are left. Actually, just 100 years ago, anarchists were considered those who were on the left side of things, and they were more like anarcho-communists, as they are called now, as opposed to anarcho-capitalists that we claim to be. So, communists originally wanted a stateless world, as we know, and even the I believe Lenin and Trotsky, they wanted a world revolution of the proletariat, and they wanted to cancel nations, to cancel states, to cancel absolutely everything, to that just create a global stateless world in which the workers kind of rule. I don't know what that world looks like. I honestly can't imagine it, although I'm pretty sure they've written a lot of books on the topic. But it's just with the mind that we have right now, and with Bitcoin taking over, I think it's really difficult to imagine what that world will look like. But at the same time, even today's globalists are also communists, and people who promote the Great Reset and things like that, they're also communists if you take into account their views on the economy, on capitalism. As you can see, there's a lot of anti-capitalist messages out there. There's the famous meme that goes around the internet right now that says, you will own nothing and you will be happy, that they promptly removed from the website, of course, the website of the World Economic Forum. But it's the internet remembers everything forever. So the globalists are kind of in favor of the complete opposite of what communists were originally in favor of, and they are right now in favor of a one world government. Rather, instead of a stateless world where there is no government at all, and somehow people just just do things spontaneously, there is actually the other extreme here, and that is a one world government, a super state. So also nations and all the states that exist right now, sovereign states, they cease to exist, and instead, and a bunch of unelected officials essentially just install a single world government that is ruled by an elite. I guess the executive branch of that one world government would be the technocratic elites, Googles, the Facebooks, and the Twitters of our time. Essentially, they will be the one managing the services and the goods and services industries and things like that. We can already see how this is happening slowly but surely. With the proliferation of Amazon and Google into all areas of our life, right? You can already not just buy a book from Amazon. You can go to a physical grocery store by Amazon and things like that. And Google, I don't need to mention that you can do many things with Google right now. So these tech giants are responsible for executing and monitoring executing the edicts of the ruling elite, and monitoring the population, and do their bidding pretty much in any domain of life. So how do I actually see the world of anarcho-capitalism right now? So what I see right now, I think it's not entirely anti-state, but it's rather anti-modern nation state. So what would be the difference? So here I'm saying that the world of anarcho-capitalism, the way I see it, is not entirely anti-state. Does that make me a statist? Well, not really, because there's a difference between what a modern nation state looks like and an actual state that is probably preferred to what we have today with the modern nation state. So the modern nation state can also be called or referred to as a fiat state, and I think it's a fair description of it, because it is fueled by and only possible thanks to fiat money. This is very, very important, because people underestimate how the money that people use actually affects all domains of life. And if you're not sure about that, well, I highly recommend you to follow Saifeddin Ammous on Twitter, and to follow the development of his new book called the Fiat Standard, because if you don't know yet, he wrote an excellent introduction to Bitcoin, an excellent introduction to economics called the Bitcoin Standard. And after that, he also decided to write a book called the Fiat Standard, which will be dedicated to how the monetary standard that we have right now, which is the fiat money standard, affected all kinds of domains of life. And it doesn't only include, the financial system, but everything like culture and food and religion. Absolutely everything in life was affected by the introduction of fiat money. So I think Saif will be posting not articles, but the chapters from the book in full, so you can follow him and see. I'm really looking forward to reading that. But long story short, what fiat state is not, it is not a state that runs on sound money, because sound money prevents money printing. And if you know, money printing is what is really, really popular right now. Just recently, they've been printing trillions and trillions of dollars, right? At the same time, in a fiat state, there can be, in a fiat state, there are things like senseless wars, right? They can be conducted because of the money printer that exists in the hands of the elites, right? So if you're running a state under a sound money standard, then you cannot have these senseless wars that we see right now, because they are simply too expensive. You don't have a printer to print money to buy and to pay for the military and the new technology and the new ammunition, equipment, everything. You simply have no money. If you know anything about how the wars were held under the gold standard before, well, they were very expensive. Those wars were a lot smaller. A thing like a world war was really impossible, because people had to count how much gold they had in their coffers to spend on the army. And if they didn't have enough, they really had to borrow it. That was the only choice they had. They couldn't print it. That was the point. At the same time, in in a country, in a state under sound money standard, you cannot force people to spend their savings, and that is very important because in such a state, inflation doesn't really eat away the purchasing power of people. They can actually save money for the long term and not be affected by the money printer, which is essentially the definition of inflation. You print a lot of money and the prices start going up and everything gets more expensive while your salary doesn't really keep up with the rate of inflation, right? So people are forced to spend money because they know that what they earned right now will be worth less in the future. Their purchasing power will be smaller. So this the fiat standard that all nation states run on right now, it changes the incentive structure across the board. Essentially, it changes the incentive structure entirely towards a high time preference. And if you don't remember, time preference is an economic term that basically means whether you care or care not for the future and for the long term, right? So if you have a high time preference, you essentially live only for the present moment, not really caring about the future. So when you want to spend money and not save it, it's a high time preference behavior. If you want to save for the long term, if you care about the well-being of your kids, for example, or want to save to leave something to the next generations, that is a low time preference behavior. So fiat money encourages high time preference behavior, while sound money encourages low time preference behavior. So under a sound money standard, the consumerist society actually becomes an anti-consumer society because there's more savings. There's not the things that people produce are long-lasting. They don't produce crap anymore that you have to replace every year. They don't produce iPhone every year and try to sell it to you so that because the previous one had 2 cameras and now this one has 3 cameras, right? This stuff doesn't exist anymore under a sound monetary standard. The consumerist stuff is only possible because of the fiat money that has to be spent right now. You cannot save it. You cannot save it because the purchasing power will melt away. So when you don't have sound money, all these things that I just mentioned, you get fiat nation state. That's what you have. Fiat nation state is essentially a nation state that runs under a fiat money standard. So essentially, under this nation state, you have unlimited fake money printed by the elites for their own purposes. You have wars, you have fear mongering all the time. This is what we can see very, very easily. You have complete degradation of culture due to high time preference behaviors that essentially become the norm in our society. And you do have eradication of tradition. There is no long-term thinking anymore. There is no thinking about the next generation. So why do you care about tradition anymore if you don't have anything to pass along to the next generations, right? So tradition just simply disappears, and only the things that are really superficial become the norm of the day. And of course, you get bad quality of absolutely everything produced here, and I just mentioned it a little earlier. But yeah, you have bad quality of stuff that you have. Absolutely everything from electronics to your clothing, even to food. Everything gets worse and worse and worse, and it needs to be recycled very fast and purchased and gotten rid of very, very fast. So that's the bottom line when it comes to the world that we have right now, the nation states, the fiat nation states that we have right now. So, but this is basically the local state of affairs. So, what would an anarcho-capitalist world look like? And an anarcho-capitalist world, I guess, is dominated by states that operate under a sound money standard, right? In our case right now, it's Bitcoin. Of course, we all think, not all of us, but a lot of us think that Bitcoin is the next reserve currency of the world. Gold is probably losing this race. It's probably not even in the race. It's just, right now it's basically Bitcoin. And let's imagine we have this anarcho-capitalist world here. We have 21,000 citadels around the world. And what would these states, citadels, look like? And I refer to them as states as well, because I don't think that states will actually go away. Rather, instead of nation states that run on the fiat standard, the states that run on sound money standard will transform themselves, and they would become more or less of a hybrid between what used to be, which is old monarchies and republics, and something that can be, improved upon those as well. So I think in terms of governance structures, most of these will be monarchies or aristocratic republics. And I talked about that, and I actually wrote about that too, about how monarchies and republics are the most efficient ways to rule, right? Because, well, first of all, they are small compared to current nation states. They don't take such huge territories. And if you understand about management, effective management can only happen in small areas, right? At most, the level of the city is probably the largest level, the largest scale that a person or, committee, so to speak, or aristocratic committee in a republic can manage. They cannot really manage anything beyond that, because they have to be there all the time. And I guess the rule of thumb here, if a citizen cannot reach the ruler very, very easily, if it takes maybe more than a few hours to drive to the ruler, then that place is probably a little too big already in terms of management. Now, of course, these states, these small states, will probably occur naturally on small scale. And if we compare the world of today with just about 200 countries and the world of the future with these 21,000 citadels, how will they appear, right? There will be all kinds of events that will happen, and I can see that some of the countries will have huge secessionist movements. Even the United States is not an exception here. Actually, right now it's probably a number one country to monitor in terms of secessionist movements. We can already see the what's happening between various states, and governors of the states literally just don't want to follow the executive orders signed by the new president, Joe Biden there. So this speaks volumes, so that people are not happy. Not all states are happy with the things that are happening in the country. And a talk of secession has been around for quite a while in states like Texas, but I don't think it was really something serious before the events of last autumn. So now it's probably getting more serious. So such events will happen more and more in the world, and most likely, a lot of piece by piece, a lot of parcels of land and cities and states and various provinces and whatever they are called in different countries will be splitting and splitting off and becoming their own sovereign states, which in turn will be also probably broken down into smaller units and become self-reliant and independent. At the same time, we can also foresee that if Bitcoin goes up pretty much forever, then it becomes a very, very desired asset. And if it becomes desired asset, a lot more desired than land, then some of the states, maybe starting with some smaller states like islands and some states that are in third world countries, their state leaders will probably consider selling some of their land, government land, owned by that country for Bitcoin, because that will be a good way for them to actually, get some money, some real hard money, which is Bitcoin. So they will be able to just sell a parcel of land that belongs to their country to some kind of a rich Bitcoiner or a corporation, or I don't know, to Michael Saylor maybe, and not just sell it and keep it under the country's flag. No, they will sell it off, and they will say, okay, this doesn't belong to us anymore. It is actually a freehold now, right? Like it belongs to you. You can start your own country there. So that is a possibility of how these citadels will appear. Now, in this ANCAP world with these citadels, another characteristic is that there is a true contractual relationship between citizens and the state, right? The citizens are not really slaves of the system, so to speak. They are more like clients. And that is the difference between what used to be before and this kind of a anarcho-capitalist view of things, right? The citizens become clients of these states, and even though there's a monarchy and there's an actual king, maybe a hereditary king, or if it's a republic, it doesn't matter, because these entities, these rulers, will have to pretty much please their citizens, because their own well-being it depends on the well-being of their citizens. And because now you have 21,000 citadels to choose from, which is the second point here, which is that citizens can vote with their money and with their feet. You have a situation in which you really have to do extraordinarily well. You have to provide really good conditions for your citizens so that they actually stick around. Because if they don't like what you're doing in your plot of land, they don't care if you call yourself king or not. They just move, because it's very easy to move. There's your citadel is just one of the 21,000. There's 20,999 more to choose from, and it's super easy for them to move away. So you really have to work. You have to compete, just like any regular company on the free market competes for clients. Your citizens are also clients, and you as a king have to provide all the best, facilities and whatnot for the citizens. So that is what I mean by true contractual relationship between citizens and the state of the future, the smaller citadel state that we're talking about here. So to summarize all this long description of the ANCAP or anarcho-capitalist world on a global and a local level, locally, states, although modified, will still exist. But there will be many more of them, like tens of thousands, probably, maybe hundreds of thousands. Our planet is really huge, actually, if you think about it. And they will be all much smaller, much smaller. They will not take the territory of a whole continent. And on a global level, there will be freedom of choice, complete freedom of choice and freedom of movement that will exist among people. There will be, as ANCAPs like to speak, no imaginary lines or borders, but there will be rather tens of thousands independent spots on the planet that, there exist these heat maps, right? If you turned on that heat map to see the planet where the spots are, that planet will be pretty much covered in red spots with lots and lots of citadels. So this is the way I see it. This is the way I see the anarcho-capitalist world develop logically and going to its logical conclusion, right? So with that, I do have a question for everybody else, whether it's someone from the audience or whether someone wants to write me on Twitter or by email and whatnot. And the question is the following. So let's take two premises here. The first point of the question is that our ideal anarcho-capitalist world has reached its logical conclusion. Let's say there's 21,000 citadels that exist, maybe 210,000. I don't know. The planet, like I said, is pretty big. They are independent and beautiful, and all land is private and belongs to the citadels. Of course, except for some wild areas that I like to call the wasteland, and I wrote about the wasteland and what that is, right? But most of the land is taken up, right? It's owned by citadels. Citadels can be different. That may be a different topic for the conversation. So, and point number two in the question is: any group of humans, according to natural law, tends to expand. So, if you take a group of humans like a family procreates. They create children and they expand. If you take a bunch of families in a community, that becomes, with time, a village. A village also needs to grow. A village with time grows into a city, or a village can unite with other villages and become a small town, right? So the point here is that humans tend to expand with time. Now, what happens when a citadel needs to expand naturally when all the other land is already taken by other citadels? And again, this is unlikely to happen, but this is just a logical conclusion of our thought experiment here when it comes to anarcho-capitalism. So I will repeat the question: what happens when a citadel needs to expand when all the other land is already taken by other citadels, right? And here's a couple of points as well, and kind of additional questions here. So, as I mentioned, war and conquest in such a world are very, very expensive due to the sound money standard. And such things like wars, they have dire consequences. Even if you are a winner in a war between two citadels, you will still have dire consequences because all the other thousands and thousands of citadels will really not want to deal with you anymore and may even, become a bit averse of your whole existence. So, what will happen with the citadel that wants to expand? Will citadels start uniting? And if yes, in what fashion? Will they form a federation, for example? And if they form a federation, will there be an elected official, like a president? And if there is a president, does that introduce democracy again? Because a long time ago, we decided that democracy is not really the way to go, of course. But if now we have to unite a few citadels and someone actually has to be overseeing this new union, who will that be? A new president or someone else? If not the president, then will a new king or a royal family be chosen to rule this federation in a hereditary way? But then, in any case, I think, is this essentially a birth of a new empire? That's my question. If you have a union of citadels that is ruled by either a president or a new king, like a king of kings, I guess, does that mean that there is a birth of a new empire here? And will more empires appear in this way? And again, will the world have fewer states than that will become larger and more powerful? And does that bring us back to square one, where we left off, right? Does that bring us to maybe a couple of hundred states, or 5 states, or 2 states? Are we supposed to repeat the cycle over and over? That is my whole point, right? So think about this. It's just it's a thought experiment, and I would like to hear what you think about it. Obviously, I haven't touched upon things like expansion into space and things like that. Let's imagine there is no expansion to space, and even if there is, I think the Earth is still too precious to ignore. And the very first thing the very first surface that citadels will try to expand on will be here locally on Earth. So yeah, let's not focus on space right now. This is the question. I hope you liked it. If you have any comment and you have an answer to this question, I'm happy to receive it on social media or even here right now. If anybody wants to speak, you can raise your hand right now. I will keep this going for a couple of more minutes probably, and then I will wrap this up. With that said, thank you for joining and listening to Citadelium, and I'll talk to you again.